What's going on, everyone? Wimbledon 2018 is upon us. The draw is out. The sun is shining. I can't complain, although the sun probably isn't shining in England because it usually doesn't. Court 1 is getting a roof, though. That's fun. I think next year. I don't think they'll have it ready this year. Anyway, I digress. It is that time of year, the 2018 Wimbledon preview. This is part 1 of a 2-part preview. So for this time around, this video, it's going to be what you're used to seeing. I'm going to talk about the big guns. I'm going to go quarter by quarter, what I expect to see, some questions I have, some things we should be watching for, etc., etc. And then in part 2, I will have Daniel Scotti on the phone to talk Wimbledon. He is Action Network's tennis writer and specializes in tennis gambling, and I think you'll enjoy that. Whatever your perspective is on the gambling stuff, whether you gamble or you don't gamble, it should be a very enjoyable conversation. But for now, let's talk about this draw. Let's talk about this tournament, and I will go quarter by quarter, but I'll tell you what, I have so many thoughts on Nadal, Djokovic, Federer, and Cilic that I want to just start by talking about those 4 individually. And then I'll dig deeper into the quarters and some of the things, maybe some upsets that I like, the usual, where I'll tell you a dark horse, I'll give you someone who's on upset alert, I'll give you my winner, and I'll show you all the top seeds in the quarter. But first, I gotta say, this is pretty much seeing the draw. I had the opposite reaction seeing this draw than I had seeing the French Open draw. In the French Open draw, I was kind of upset because I thought 2 of the best players in the tournament were in the same quarter. And there were a few other little things that kind of bothered me about the way the draw was set up in a way that didn't make for, in my opinion, the most intriguing semifinal matchups. This couldn't be any more different. I think the best 4 players in this tournament, Cilic, Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal, they are all in separate quarters. I feel very strongly that those 4 are the 4 best players in this tournament. So in that respect, I'm very, very happy. And I'll tell you what, I think we're in for a chalky tournament. And in layman's terms, what that means is I think the people who we expect to see get through, I think they're going to get through. I've looked long and hard, and I'm not ready to pick against any 4 of those guys. And I'm sorry to ruin the suspense of who I have coming out of each quarter, but it is those 4 guys. Let me talk about, I'll start by talking about Roger Federer. The prevailing sense is that in a 5-set format, at Wimbledon, where Federer possesses that aura of invincibility and gets to play lower ranked players in, his first round and his second round and even his third round, Federer is going to find his rhythm. He's going to find his groove and his form. And when he's in form, he's the best grass court player on tour. That is the prevailing sense. However, when you step back and look at Roger Federer's season, there is, I think, reason for concern. There is not one tournament this season that I can look at and I can say Roger Federer played his best tennis in this tournament. However, the results still have been pretty good. You look at the Australian Open in that final against Marin Cilic, never found his rhythm until the 5th set. He didn't have a dominant Australian Open, but you leave the Australian Open saying he didn't play his best, but he won it. I mean, that's honestly maybe more impressive than if he had played his best tennis. Then he goes to Indian Wells. He makes the final. That's not bad at all. Loses to Del Potro. Del Potro was playing great, but still a loss, still unable to win Indian Wells. Then in Miami, he gets upset. After Miami, even with the upset, Roger Federer takes that 10 out of 10 times. You win Australian Open, make the final of Indian Wells, and get upset at Miami, totally fine. But then, of course, he takes the clay court season off. It's the form that he's shown in this grass court season. And traditionally, he's lost at Stuttgart. He actually won Stuttgart. Still didn't look that good in doing so. Then Halle didn't look good all week, lost in the finals to Borna Coric. If you look at the results themselves, Roger Federer has had a really good 2018. What you'd expect at the very least. But still, I feel like we haven't seen Roger Federer's 2017 form. beginning of 2017 form. I don't think we've seen that all year. So for Roger Federer in this tournament, here's what I want to say. Last season, I would have said there is a greater than 50% chance that Roger Federer wins Wimbledon. I would take him over anyone else in the field. So I would bet, if with even odds, I would bet Roger Federer to win Wimbledon over anyone else. I would not make that bet for this tournament. I do think that the chance that Roger Federer wins Wimbledon have crept under 50%. Does he have the best chance to win Wimbledon? I'm not telling you yet. That's for the end of the video. Okay. So in that sense, Roger Federer, there's a little bit more intrigue here. Will Roger Federer win Wimbledon? I think that that's a tougher question to answer this year than it was last year. Let's take a look at his path. Lajovic in the first round, Lacko in the second round, Karlovic in the third round. Very manageable, Lajovic and Lacko, although Lajovic is a good player. Ivo Karlovic, Sam Querrey, Gilles Muller, Kevin Anderson, all in Federer's quarter. I feel like every year in Wimbledon, there's like the big serving quarter. I don't know why that happens, but it seems to happen every year. I don't get it. But this is the big serving quarter. How does Federer fare against that? I actually think that when it comes to Federer's return, he doesn't cover the box as well as a Murray and a Djokovic. So in that sense, his return isn't as good. But when it comes to absorbing pace, absorbing 135 mile per hour serves, whether that be off the racket of a Milos Raonic or a John Isner, an Ivo Karlovic, I think Federer does it really, really well. There's that. And Federer's one of the best tiebreak players in the history of the sport. So when you combine those two things, big servers don't really concern me against Federer. Of course, though, when the margins are smaller, there's more risk of an upset. But when it comes to Federer's draw, I think that in terms of the big servers, it doesn't bother me. Now, what about Borna Coric? He could play Borna Coric in the fourth round. Now, by the way, watch out for what's his name? Medvedev. Medvedev's a dangerous player. Coric does not have an easy first-round matchup, so he's got to watch out there. But if Coric does make it to the fourth round, excuse me, 1, 2, 3, the fourth round. If he does make it that far, of course, Coric just beat Federer in the finals in Halle. So what does that mean? I think that the biggest thing where the biggest area where Coric played over his head was the serve. That was it was way above his average level. His serve was. Coric's serve was so much better than it usually is. I think that that's the biggest area where we would likely see regression if Federer met Coric at Wimbledon. But then once again, it's just having faith in Federer to find his form in the, really probably, if not right away, then by the time he's, midway through the Lucas Lacko match. Let's see how he looks. And then Evo, it's hard to really get a rhythm against Evo. But Federer, Wimbledon, best of 5 or invincibility, he probably gets going, and you'd expect to see that match look a little bit different than it did in Halle. So my concern level out of 10 would be a 3, honestly. And you heard how big a fan I am of Borna Coric, but it'd be fine, maybe a 4, but I wouldn't be too concerned. So that's Roger Federer. Pretty certain he'll get out of his quarter. Let's go, instead of going to Cilic, I want to talk about Nadal. Nadal has not made the Wimbledon quarterfinals since 2010. He's lost to Lucas Rosol. He's lost to Steve Darcy. He's lost to Nick Kyrgios. He's lost to Dustin Brown. He's lost to Gilles Muller. I am not seeing experts pick Rafa Nadal to win Wimbledon. I haven't seen a single one. That is unfounded to me. I think that Nadal is due for a great Wimbledon. I would be stunned if he was upset early in this Wimbledon. First of all, a few things. Everything I'm about to say, I said before last year's Wimbledon. But Rafa has shown later in his career an ability to really step up his serve on the grass. He served so well last year at Wimbledon. I think he'll do that again. His backhand is so good right now, perhaps the best it's been in his career. That is essential for the grass court tennis, because Nadal is not able to hit as many forehands on grass. He has to hit more backhands because of the faster surface. His backhand has looked so good. He should be extremely confident after coming back and what he's done on the clay courts. And there's a sense just simply that he's due. Last year at Wimbledon, I thought Nadal looked great. He got out of those dangerous first couple rounds where the grass courts are slippery and fast, and he has trouble with the serve. And I got to tell you, he ran into the worst possible matchup on the worst possible day. Gilles Muller playing out of his mind. I don't see that happening again. Duty Sela in the first round. Mikhail Kukushkin in the second round, a good grass court player. He's won a set off of Nadal at Wimbledon, but doesn't have that big serve that it takes to upset Nadal early. And then a lot of people think it will be Misha Zverev in the third round. I beg to differ. I actually think that Alex de Minaur will beat Misha Zverev, which would be a blessing for Rafa Nadal, because Misha Zverev has that lefty slicing serve that can give him trouble on the grass. Sort of a similar player to Gilles Muller. So I think that Rafa will be rooting for de Minaur over Misha Zverev in that third round. And I think Nadal will get his wish. But regardless, so that's something to watch out for, I guess. If he plays Sascha Zverev, he will need to kind of figure out his return, which is hard for him on grass. Then Jan Vesely, once again, big serving lefty, just not at the level of Gilles Muller. So it's the prototype that can give Nadal trouble, but I just don't feel like Jan Vesely is no Gilles Muller. Guys who I think if Nadal had Federer's quarter, that would not be good stylistically for Nadal. I think he's fortunate about that. Not that Federer has a way harder draw than Nadal. He really doesn't. In fact, I like both of their draws. I think both of their draws are pretty favorable. I think the quarter of death is the quarter with Novak Djokovic and Alexander Zverev, Nick Kyrgios, Kei Nishikori, Dominic Thiem. That is the deepest quarter. That is the quarter of death. Federer has avoided that. Nadal has avoided that. I think that Vesely, by the way, because I just mentioned that I think Nadal plays Vesely in the fourth round. Vesely would have to beat Fognini and Diego Schwartzman, who has never won a match on grass in his life. So Nadal will not have to play a high seed until Del Potro in the quarterfinals. And I favor Nadal on the grass against Del Potro that late in the tournament. I really think the low bounce really hurts Del Potro. On the backhand wing, he's probably forced to slice it more, and now the grass does help Del Potro slice, but Nadal is so good against the slice. I mean, he eats it up consistently. And then I just think that the low bounce bothers Del Potro, and he's not the best mover on grass either. He's a far better mover on hard court. So I think Nadal has a good draw. I think Federer has a good draw. I think they're both getting out of their quarters. I know that there's no suspense here because I've said I expect chalk here. Let's talk about Marin Cilic before we get to that quarter of death. Cilic, in my opinion, I mean, he's flying under the radar for no reason. It's not just. He has been a model of consistency. Wimbledon quarterfinal in the last 4 years. Last year he made the finals. He's made the semifinals in 4 out of the last 5 majors. This is the prime of Marin Cilic's career. This is his time. And he played the best tennis I've ever seen him play last week in Queens. There's only one problem with Cilic. I just don't trust him in a big match, in a big moment, with all the eyes on him to close it out. But I don't think we'll see him in that moment prior to the semifinals. I really don't. There is some concern. A guy like Milos Raonic can have a close match with Marin Cilic and could put some pressure on him. You know, maybe some tie breaks, maybe some some very consequential points. But honestly, in the form that Cilic is in right now, I wouldn't be surprised if Cilic can avoid those razor thin margins. Another guy. Let's see. Who would he play? Sorry, let me just pull up the draw here, just so I have this down. Cilic. Oh yeah, and then John Isner. John Isner's that other guy. And Isner's another guy who makes the margins razor thin. But I think that Cilic is at such a high level. I have faith in him to actually avoid those margins. That's how well I think Cilic is playing. He's returning well. His ball striking is great. His movement is so good. His first strike tennis. This is Cilic's time. I expect him to play some of the best tennis of his life right now. So I'm not going to pick against him. It's time for people to start. I don't know why he's so under the radar. It's probably just because he hasn't achieved those big wins. And even in the major he won, that 2014 U.S. Open, in the final, all he had to do was beat Kei Nishikori. No disrespect, but you know, you get a little bit more street cred, so to speak, if you beat a guy like Federer maybe in the final instead of the semifinal, or a guy like Djokovic or Nadal. But Cilic, a model of consistency. He'll continue that. The last quarter is Alexander Zverev's quarter. And like I said, you got Kyrgios, you got Zverev, you got Nishikori, and you have Djokovic. I think that, to me, the form that Novak's shown in Queens should be all you have to really see. Novak was moving really well, striking the ball really well. And to me, you got Dominic Thiem in there. Grass is one of his worst surface, probably his worst. It is his worst surface. Zverev is not aggressive enough on the grass. His game, he doesn't play good enough first strike tennis with his forehand. I don't like Zverev on the grass. And then, Kyrgios, who knows about his hip? Who knows about his mental? The interesting part will be, will Kyrgios show his potential and beat Nishikori and Zverev? Because he really should. It's just, will his mental allow him to? Will his hip allow him to? I'm actually going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I know I've lost confidence in him, as a previous video told you, but I'm actually going to give Kyrgios the benefit of the doubt here. But I do have Djokovic coming out. Okay, let's run through these quarters now in a more formal way. Oh, wow, why am I here? Hold on. I don't want to start with that. I want to start with this. Federer, Anderson, Query, Coric. I have Federer coming out. Gilles Muller is my dark horse. The rules for dark horse is an unseeded player who I believe has a chance to make a quarterfinal. So no seeded players allowed in my dark horse category. And upset alert, Kevin Anderson, of course, because I think Muller will upset Anderson. Marin Cilic's quarter. You got Grigor Dimitrov, John Isner, Milos Raonic, and I have Cilic coming out of that. No dark horses. I don't really see anyone there. And then Grigor, I don't know why there's a comma before Dimitrov, and Lucas Pouille. I'd say that Denis Kudla will upset Lucas Pouille, who is the second seed. A fun name to say. And also, I think Dimitrov, who's just been in terrible form, will likely fall to the winner of Jared Donaldson and Stefanos Tsitsipas. Tsitsipas has picked up a few wins on the grass, despite my gut telling me that he would not be very good on the surface. But still, he's picked up some good wins. Moving on to Zverev's quarter, you got Dominic Thiem, Novak Djokovic, Nick Kyrgios. Just talked about that. I have Djokovic coming out, and my dark horse, I have two. Karen Khachanov, who will likely beat Dominic Thiem, in my opinion, and also Frances Tiafoe, who I think has a good chance to beat Fernando Verdasco in the first round. Tiafoe looks like the grass suits him quite well. Upset alert, Dominic Thiem. He is the number 7 seed, but he just isn't very good on grass. And then in Nadal's quarter, Juan Martin Del Potro, David Goffin, Diego Schwartzman, who has never won a match on grass. I'm just going to keep saying that. because it's kind of funny to be that high in the rankings and to have never won a match on grass is pretty funny. Dark horse Jan Vesely, I think I already touched upon Vesely and how he can beat Fognini and Schwartzman, and then Schwartzman on upset alert. Moving on to the second weekend, it would pit Roger Federer against Marin Cilic, and it would pit Novak Djokovic against Rafael Nadal. Federer, I'm just going to reveal it in the form of a graphic. Here is the final weekend. Federer over Cilic in 5 sets. Cilic just hasn't been able to get over that hump, and still, I trust Roger Federer to close it out, and I'm not sure I trust Marin Cilic to close it out. And when it's all said and done for Marin Cilic, we could look back and say, he just lost too many big points in his career. He was this close to winning that major, and he was this close to winning that major. At the same time, Cilic really scares me if I'm a Roger Federer fan. So I do want to give him that respect. And I do think that Cilic will win another major. It'll come. Maybe the U.S. Open this year. Then in the other semifinal, Nadal and Djokovic, I would have that as a 4-setter. And Djokovic is not a good matchup for Nadal. Djokovic is traditionally better on a grass court, but I think by that time Nadal will have built up so much confidence, and there's still in my eyes such a gap between the mental games of Nadal and Djokovic that I think that Nadal gets through that match. And I think Djokovic would be favored in that match. I think most people would expect Djokovic to win in that match, and I think they'd wind up wrong. I just think that this is Nadal's Wimbledon. I think it's time for Nadal to have a good Wimbledon. But in the final, Federer over Nadal in 4 sets. So here's the thing, and remember what I said in the beginning. I think that this is an under 50% chance that Federer wins Wimbledon. I think these guys, all 4 of these guys, are playing so well. But based on the way we've seen the matchup go between Federer and Nadal, how surface reliant this matchup has gone, how Federer has won the last 4 times, is it really going to be the Wimbledon final where Nadal, breaks this Roger Federer win streak? It would seem so unlikely to me that it's the Wimbledon final that is going to be the venue where Nadal is able to break this losing streak against Roger Federer. We've seen Nadal's cross-court forehand to Federer's backhand. We've seen that rendered not ineffective, but I guess it no longer bothers Roger Federer the way it used to. And on grass, with the lower bounce, traditionally that has been kind of the issue with Nadal. And then the gap in serving between Nadal and Federer also really comes out on grass. So I cannot pick Nadal over Federer in a Wimbledon final, but I feel very strongly about Nadal's level, his confidence coming into the Wimbledon. Nadal is not done winning on grass. He will not continue the rest of his career without winning on grass. It's not going to happen. He needs to figure out his return, but other than that, he will be ready. I believe he will figure it out. And he just seemed so ready to me last year's Wimbledon. And I thought he got so unlucky. And even after the match, he was so positive. He's like, I think I played well. I'm ready to win on grass. He is going to come in with a chip on his shoulder, and he'll be a man on a mission, as he always is, but I think a little bit, I think he'll be even more intense than he usually is at this year's Wimbledon. He's ready to go. I'm telling you, Rafa's ready to go. But Federer, ultimately, it's hard to doubt him, and it's hard to say that he wouldn't figure it out. It's really hard to pick Cilic over Federer right now. What we saw in last year's Wimbledon final, where Cilic did battle an injury, but it was such a lopsided match, and it is such a tall task for Marin Cilic, who I believe has just had trouble with nerves and tightening up and losing his footwork and his movement, and especially on his backhand, getting too stiff. It's just hard to see him closing out Roger Federer at center court on Wimbledon right now. So that's it. So as always, guys, these are always some of the most active comment sections, some of the more fun comment sections to read. Everyone's got their Wimbledon predictions. By the way, let me put this out there. In my opinion, the second most likely outcome in Wimbledon is Cilic beats Federer and Nadal beats Cilic in the final, and Nadal wins Wimbledon. So I don't like that. I've read many expert predictions. I've seen some people say, I think Djokovic is going to win. I've seen one person say Cilic. I've seen many say Federer. No one said Nadal. And to me, that's unfounded. What do you guys think? Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. Remember to tune in to part 2 of this Wimbledon preview when I will talk to Daniel Scotti. That is when I will see you next time.